Good afternoon, and thank you, first of all, for the invitation to attend this conference. As introduced initially, I work with the 1st German Netherlands Corps, which is part of the NATO force structure. 1GNC, which is our short name, is a headquarter ready to lead operations at different levels. And from the summer of 2017 to summer 2018, we were on standby as a joint task force for small land-centric operations for NATO. And we have just come out of 5 weeks of exercise with the Trident Juncture 18, where we were certified from the 1st of January to be the Land Component Command in the NRF 19. What I present today is my view. It's not necessarily the view of the 1st German Netherlands Corps. And I will focus specifically on the land domain, and I will take us down to the tactical land domain. I do still, though, believe that some of my observations would be relevant also for the other services and for the other levels. And I will also stick to my speaking notes because, one, I'm a non-native English speaker, and I want to stay within the given time frame. The title of this panel is, as we've heard, is NATO ready to provide relevant capabilities in time? Well, in my introduction, I'll focus on relevant capabilities and in time. Let me begin with a few observations when it comes to in time. The NATO Response Force is a first responder to a crisis, and it should be sent before hostilities break out in order to deter. But it will, of course, be ready to fight if that is necessary. In order to be at the correct location in time, we need, as we've heard from several speakers earlier today, a timely decision. We need it in order to be able to move, because notice to move is one thing, notice to effect is a totally different thing. In the air and the maritime domain, it's often quicker and easier to move formations than in the land domain. We need to have either land transportation, air, or sea transportation, or a combination of most likely all of them, in order to get our forces transported over large distances. It doesn't mean that land forces are slow, but it means, by its nature, that we need to have a timely decision. And to take that timely decision is, of course, then up to the authorities that we have in NATO. But it's not only about taking a timely decision. As also has been mentioned earlier today, it's about ensuring that we have in place the correct measures to ensure that once a decision is made, we can move within a short time as possible. So, for example, to work on border arrangements, to work on contracts with shipping, with planes, and so on, will all have to be in place if we really want to be able to get to a location in a given time. To have relevant capabilities is crucial for any kind of operation. And I will not now touch upon what kind of capabilities we would need to have, because that will, of course, depend on what kind of crisis we're acting to. I'll instead address what is needed to make this force package with the capabilities, what we need to make that relevant. For the last 10 to 15 years, most of our forces have been engaged in peace support operations in the Balkans, in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other places. And these operations have then naturally been the focus for our education, for our training. And we have worked a lot on counterinsurgency and traditional peace support operations, where we have had very many small units engaged. And they have been engaged in pretty heavy battles, a lot of hard fighting, but they've been engaged very often against an enemy who technically has been far less advanced than we have. We have faced combat operations at the low level, and we have faced an adversary who tries to avoid our strengths and avoid meeting us in the open. And this way of fighting has changed our tactics and our operating procedures to the point where we are less able to encounter a near-peer adversary head-on. Although it has given us the ability to think faster and more out of the box, which may be required in the new age thinking of countering an ever-changing and developing threat. During the Cold War era, we were used to training and exercising with large formations We did battle space management, a huge focus on logistics and of movement of large formations, and to conduct a more moving battle than what we have seen in our operations over the last 20 years. We have a whole generation of officers who have spent their entire career working in COIN operations, peace support operations. And we see that we need to relearn very much of what we did and knew by heart back in the Cold War. We also have to adapt this scenario. We can't just go into and do things like we did it in the Cold War. We need to do this in the new setting, the new scene, where we have hybrid threats that we didn't think that much about during the Cold War. So you can't only take old practices and do it again. You have to refocus it and look into how does the world look like today. And in order to do this, we need to train and we need to exercise realistically. And I would argue that Trident Juncture has been a good training venue. When we, during the LiveX, we conducted reception, staging, force integration, and combat enhancement training. It was a good training effect for the younger officers and also for the others of us who were in the headquarters, because it once again showed us what it takes to take formations from A to B, to make us ready to take the forces, to set up all the convoys, the columns that we needed to move from the harbors, to coordinate all this, and to make it move smoothly up to the reception areas, where they then did their force integration. But that was the LiveX portion. What we also had, and that we ended Friday last week, was the command post exercise. I will not go into any details there, but the command post exercise that took place over 2 weeks involved everything from SACEUR and down to us, where we played the land component level, and further down, was a very interesting and, believe me, very challenging exercise that put to the point a lot of dilemmas also for the nations who were involved. That was also a very important part of the Trident Juncture exercise. We have to continue to conduct these kind of exercises. I recognize it's very expensive to do the Trident Juncture LiveX, but I would still say it was necessary. Even though it was planned many months, I would say years ahead, it gave us still realistic and valuable training. But of course, we cannot forget the operations and where we're coming from over the last years. Most likely, we will again deploy on crisis response operations. And it's dangerous, as the previous speaker mentioned, to now put away the experiences that we have there and only to focus in one single direction. We have to be able to look holistically, 360-degree, and understand that the military tool is one of the tools in the toolbox. And whenever the politicians decide to deploy the military, we will never do it in splendid isolation. We will always have to remember that along with us on the field, there will be other institutions, NGOs or non-governmental organizations, international organizations, and the nations providing with different assets. The military tool is only one part, and we cannot solve any crisis by ourselves. It has to be an integrated approach or a comprehensive approach. Another critical area is interoperability, and interoperability consists of many different elements, and I'll briefly address technological, procedural, and human interoperability. And let's begin with the technological. Without the ability to quickly disperse and subsequently analyze information, we will face challenges. And this is especially important in a multinational setting. It's essential for NATO to have the capacity to distribute and receive information within near real-time situations. However, this is hampered by software problems if systems are not interoperable and compatible with each other. And we have, during both operations and exercises, experienced challenges in command and control with our subordinate headquarters. Units are very often using communication systems that are not compatible with each other and that cannot send information seamlessly to each other. The units, therefore, sometimes had to use what we call a swivel chair solution, where you have to take information from one system and manually transfer it into other systems. Of course, you lose time and accuracy while doing that. In the past, and I guess also today, NATO has proven its capacity to standardize effectively. But when it comes to interoperability within communication systems, especially in the land domain, standardization seems to be lacking. One reason for this is national security regulations and caveats, which influence then crypto requirements and drive regulations on what can be used and what cannot be used. By agreeing on a common standard, many of these challenges could have been reduced significantly, making information exchange more effective and faster. And I think we have to agree on, between the nations and the industry, on finding solutions to this and to solve these problems, because we cannot afford to lose the life of soldiers because we're not able to communicate effectively within the land domain in 2018. The procedural interoperability is also of importance. And NATO has a long history of making procedures and standards, but I would say it's still work to be done. NATO has, as we've heard several times today, a common planning process for the strategic and operational level. And when I say that, let me just also then add that I think it's correct that we have that one. I agree that it's a thick beast of a book, but at least it's a common process. So when we meet and we sit together, we can focus on that one and we use that one, because plans are nothing, planning is everything, as one wise man said many years ago. By having one standard and we use that one, it's easier, I think, the day we need to deviate and to make shortcuts or to do it slightly different. But because when we meet, we're able to, we know which processes, we know which steps we're going to go through. But I would argue that we would also need one process like this also for the tactical level. We have seen now, for example, during the last exercise, in the period where we have trained before that having officers from many different nations meet together and sit to plan, even at the low tactical level, is challenging because they don't understand each other's processes. That's why I would also dare argue that it should be one more formal procedure. The human dimension is, of course, also very important. We have to acknowledge that English is and will be the working language in NATO at all levels. We have to continuously improve our language skills, and both when it comes to speaking and writing. And we should therefore conduct all exercises, at least down to a certain level, in English. That would improve the interoperability and improve our English skills. So this, combined with using the same doctrine and the planning process during exercises and operations and education, would increase our ability to cooperate and work together. We've also seen over the last 10, 15, 20 years that multinationality down to a very low level has also more or less become the standard. And I question if it's really possible to have multinationality and to be interoperable and effective by having too many nations within one brigade or one battalion. Germany and Holland, they have a deepened integration where they have units that not only operate together on exercises, but they live together. They spend their entire time together. And I think that is a doable solution. That is workable. But to have different nations and meet for some few exercises, to do some training, my personal view is that that is not a solution for success. Because it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of training to get to know each other, to build the trust, the relationship between the commanders, between the units at all levels in order to make them effective. Building a credible force package takes time, and it takes time and will if we want it to be an effective force package. And we have to ensure that it's interoperable within all domains. And that's also why we need to continue to conduct exercises like the Trident Juncture, both LiveX, perhaps not just as big, too expensive, but to do exercises with large formations, but also to continue to conduct demanding CPX command post exercises like we just had. So let me end my introduction by quoting the motto of the 1st German Netherlands Corps, "Together Strong." NATO is the most successful security alliance in history, but we have to constantly look for new solutions to be more effective and to make it stronger and to stay relevant in the ever-changing world that we are living in. Thank you for your attention.